Jim Carver navigated the rugged terrain of the Australian outback, his eyes scanning the horizon for the source of the recent crash. The sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows that danced with the dry wind. His survival instincts, honed from years in the Special Forces, led him to a smoldering wreck in a secluded gorge. Approaching cautiously, Jim noticed the wreckage wasn't from any human craft. Its sleek, metallic surface bore strange markings that glowed faintly. His hand tightened around his rifle as he drew closer. The ship's hatch was partially open, and wisps of smoke curled out. Inside, he found an injured alien, slumped against the control panel. The alien, Tlack, had skin that shimmered like mercury and eyes that were unsettlingly large and dark. As Jim watched, Tlack's eyes flickered open, and he spoke through a small device that translated his words into halting English. "Help! You must help. Danger. Coming." Jim's initial shock gave way to curiosity and caution. He knelt beside Tlack, inspecting the wounds. They were deep, but the alien's physiology seemed to be stabilizing. Jim offered his water bottle, and Tlack drank gratefully, the translator continuing to convey his urgent message. "They are coming, Zarl. Earth. Very dangerous. They want to control it." Jim's mind raced. An alien invasion. It sounded like a bad science fiction plot, but the evidence was right in front of him. His sense of duty kicked in. He couldn't ignore this. He couldn't let Earth fall to an unknown threat. Tlack struggled to stand, and Jim helped him up. "We need to move," Jim said. "They'll be looking for you." As if on cue, a sharp sound split the air. Jim's military training took over, and he pulled Tlack into cover just as a group of Zarl scouts emerged from the sky. These creatures were fearsome, with armor that blended into the environment and weapons that hummed ominously. Jim and Tlack moved swiftly through the rocky landscape, using every bit of cover they could find. Jim's knowledge of the terrain was their only advantage. The chase was relentless, and the heat only added to the strain. During a brief respite, hidden in a cave, Tlack explained more about the Zarl. They were a conquering race, seeking to dominate planets with diverse life forms. Earth's unpredictable and adaptive species made it a prime target. Jim absorbed this information, his mind already working on a plan. He knew they couldn't face the Zarl alone. They needed help, and the nearest source of potential aid was a rogue paramilitary group he had clashed with before. They had resources, but convincing them would be a challenge. As night fell, Jim and Tlack reached the outskirts of the paramilitary base. Jim's history with the group's leader, Colonel Briggs, was rocky. Briggs was a ruthless man, more interested in power than justice. But desperate times called for desperate measures. They approached the heavily guarded perimeter. Jim raised his hands in a sign of peace, though he kept his rifle slung across his back. The guards recognized him, and after a tense standoff, they were led inside. Colonel Briggs eyed Tlack with a mixture of suspicion and greed. "What have you brought me, Carver?" he asked, his voice dripping with curiosity. "An ally," Jim replied, "and a warning. We're under threat. An alien invasion." Briggs laughed, but it was a cold sound. "You expect me to believe this?" Before Jim could respond, the base's alarms blared. Zarl scouts had tracked them. The base erupted into chaos as the defenders scrambled to repel the attack. Jim and Tlack fought side by side with Briggs's men, demonstrating the severity of the threat. The Zarl were relentless, but Jim's tactical acumen and Tlack's advanced weaponry turned the tide. As the dust settled, Briggs's expression shifted from skepticism to grim determination. "We'll need to work together," Jim said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We have to warn the rest of humanity and prepare for a full-scale invasion." Briggs nodded reluctantly. "We'll need all the help we can get. Let's get the message out." As they started fortifying the base and preparing to send a distress signal, Jim couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. The battle had only just begun, and the fate of the planet hung in the balance. Jim Carver surveyed the aftermath of the Zarl attack on the rogue paramilitary base. The night air was filled with the acrid smell of burning machinery and the distant groans of the injured. Tlack, The alien he had decided to trust was at his side, scanning for any remaining threats. The base, once a stronghold of defiance and rebellion, now lay in ruins, a testament to the ferocity of their extraterrestrial foes. Colonel Briggs, the leader of the paramilitary group, approached, his face a mask of begrudging respect and lingering suspicion. "You were right, Carver," Briggs admitted, his voice gruff. "We're dealing with something far beyond our usual skirmishes." Jim nodded. "We need to send out a distress signal to the military. The Zarl won't stop here. They'll keep coming, and we need every advantage we can get." Briggs's eyes flicked to Tlack, then back to Jim. "Your friend here has some explaining to do. What exactly are we up against?" Tlack stepped forward, his translator device rendering his voice calm yet urgent. "The Zarl are a species bent on conquest. They seek to dominate planets with diverse and adaptable life forms. Earth's biosphere makes it a prime target for their expansion." Jim watched as Briggs processed this information, his mind clearly racing. "And what do you propose we do about it?" "We need to unite," Jim said firmly. "This isn't about factions or personal grudges anymore. We have to work together to defend our planet." Briggs looked around at the remnants of his base, the flickering fires casting eerie shadows on the battered walls. "All right, Carver. We'll get the message out. But if you're wrong about this, it's all on you." As they worked to repair the communication equipment, Jim and Tlack had a moment to talk. "You've risked a lot coming here," Jim said, glancing at the alien. "Why?" Tlack's large eyes reflected the flames as he replied, "My people believe in coexistence. We seek allies to stand against the Zarl. Your world's resilience is extraordinary. We need your help as much as you need ours." Jim felt a strange sense of solidarity with Tlack. Despite their differences, they were both soldiers, both fighting for their homes. This shared purpose forged a bond that transcended species. Finally, the distress signal was ready. Briggs's technicians, under Jim's guidance, managed to send a clear message to the nearest military outpost. The response was swift. Within hours, helicopters and armored vehicles began to arrive, bringing reinforcements and supplies. Captain Sarah Mitchell, a no-nonsense officer with a reputation for decisive action, stepped out of the lead chopper. She took one look at the devastated base and then at Jim. "Carver, you'd better have a good explanation for this mess." Jim quickly briefed her on the situation, introducing Tlack and detailing the Zarl threat. Captain Mitchell listened intently, her eyes narrowing as she absorbed the information. "We'll need to mobilize quickly," she said. "If what you're saying is true, this is just the beginning." As the reinforcements set up defensive positions and began fortifying the base, Jim couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The Zarl were relentless, and he knew their next attack would be even more ferocious. Tlack, sensing Jim's unease, placed a hand on his shoulder. "We have a chance, Jim. Together we can make a stand." Jim nodded, grateful for the aliens' presence. "We'll fight, and we'll make sure they regret ever setting foot on this planet." The next few days were a blur of activity. Soldiers and paramilitary forces worked side by side, setting up defensive perimeters and strategizing their next moves. Jim found himself in constant meetings with Captain Mitchell, Briggs, and Tlack, planning for the inevitable clash. The bond between Jim and Tlack continued to grow, their mutual respect deepening with each passing hour. They shared stories of their worlds, finding common ground in their experiences of war and loss. It was clear that this alliance, though born out of necessity, had the potential to become something more. As night fell once again, a tense silence settled over the base. Everyone knew what was coming. Jim stood on the makeshift battlements, his rifle at the ready. He glanced at Tlack, who was similarly prepared, a determined look in his eyes. Suddenly, the darkness was pierced by a series of lights on the horizon. The Zarl were coming, their forces advancing with an almost mechanical precision. The ground trembled as they drew closer, their war cries echoing through the night. Jim took a deep breath, his mind sharp and focused. This was the moment they had prepared for, the moment they would show the Zarl the true strength of Earth's defenders. As the first wave of Zarl warriors crashed against their defenses, Jim and Tlak fought side by side, their movements synchronized and efficient. The battle was fierce, but they held their ground, pushing back the invaders with every ounce of strength they had. The base at Alice Springs had become a hive of activity. Soldiers and paramilitary forces alike were working together, setting up defenses and preparing for the next assault. Jim Carver stood at the center of it all, coordinating efforts with Captain Sarah Mitchell and Colonel Briggs. The urgency of their task was clear, and there was no time to waste. Tlak, ever observant, provided critical insights into the Zarl tactics. "They will not attack in the same way again," he warned. "They adapt quickly. We must be ready for anything." Jim nodded, appreciating the alien's strategic mind. "What do you suggest?" Tlak outlined a plan to set up decoys and traps around the perimeter, using the base's resources to create an unpredictable defense. Jim relayed these instructions, watching as the teams moved to implement them. Captain Mitchell approached, her expression serious. "We've received intel from satellite images. The Zarl are massing to the north. We have less than 24 hours before they strike." The news spread quickly, adding a new layer of urgency to the preparations. Jim moved through the base, checking in with the various teams. He could see the determination in their eyes, a shared resolve to protect their home. As night fell, Jim found himself standing beside Tlak on the lookout tower. The alien was staring into the distance, his face unreadable. "Do you think we have a chance?" Jim asked quietly. Tlak turned to him, his gaze intense. "Together, we are stronger. Your people have a resilience that is rare. It gives me hope." Jim appreciated the sentiment but knew the reality of the situation was dire. "We'll fight to the last," he promised. "We won't let them take our world." The following morning, the ground trembled with the approach of the Zarl forces. From the lookout tower, Jim and Tlak could see the dust clouds rising on the horizon. The defenders took their positions, weapons ready, eyes fixed on the approaching enemy. The first wave hit hard. The Zarl advanced with a relentless force, their technology and sheer numbers overwhelming. But Jim's strategy, combined with Tlak's insights, began to pay off. The decoys and traps slowed the enemy's progress, buying the defenders precious time. Jim fought at the front lines, his rifle firing with deadly accuracy. He moved with purpose, every shot deliberate, every action calculated. Beside him, Tlak used his advanced weaponry to devastating effect, their partnership seamless. Despite their efforts, the Zarl continued to press forward. Jim could see the strain in his comrades, the exhaustion beginning to take its toll. He knew they needed something more, a decisive move to turn the tide. As if sensing his thoughts, Tlak handed him a small device. "This is a disruptor. It can disable their command signals temporarily. Use it wisely." Jim took the device, understanding the gravity of the gift. "Thank you, Tlak. We'll make this count." He made his way through the chaos of battle, heading towards the center of the Zarl formation. The disruptor in hand, he moved with a determination that cut through the fear and uncertainty around him. Reaching a vantage point, Jim activated the disruptor. A pulse of energy rippled out, causing the Zarl forces to falter. Their advance slowed, confusion spreading through their ranks. Seizing the opportunity, the defenders launched a counterattack, pushing back with renewed vigor. Jim returned to the front lines, his presence a rallying point for the defenders. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation and hope, driving the Zarl back inch by inch. Tlak joined him, their efforts synchronizing as they led the charge. The battle raged on, the tide slowly turning in their favor. As the sun began to set, the Zarl forces finally began to retreat, their lines breaking under the relentless pressure of the defenders. Cheers erupted from the ranks as they watched the enemy fall back. Jim stood amidst the aftermath, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. He looked around at his comrades, their faces a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Tlak approached, a rare smile on his alien features. "We did it," Jim said, his voice rough but filled with a quiet pride. Tlak nodded. This victory is just the beginning. We must remain vigilant. The Zarl will return, but today we have shown them our strength. The air was thick with anticipation as Jim Carver and Tlack stood on the fortifications of Alice Springs, watching the Zarl forces regroup in the distance. The alien army, vast and formidable, stretched across the horizon, preparing for a final, all-out assault. Jim's mind raced with strategies, knowing this would be the decisive battle. Captain Sarah Mitchell joined them, her face set in a determined expression. Our scouts report that the Zarl are bringing in heavy artillery. We need to strike before they can deploy it. Jim nodded. We have to take the fight to them, hit their command center and disrupt their plans. Tlack, can you identify their leadership? Tlack adjusted his device, analyzing the Zarl movements. There, he pointed. In the center of their formation. That's where their command is located. Jim turned to Captain Mitchell. We'll lead a strike team. It's risky, but it's our best shot. The preparations were swift. Jim selected a group of the best fighters, both human and alien, including Briggs, who had become a reluctant but valuable ally. The plan was simple but dangerous. Infiltrate the Zarl camp, disable their command structure, and create chaos from within. As night fell, the strike team moved out. The darkness provided cover, and they navigated the rough terrain with practiced stealth. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the enemy camp. Jim's senses were on high alert, every sound magnified in the still night. They reached the outskirts of the Zarl encampment. The alien technology glowed faintly, casting an eerie light on the surroundings. Jim signaled for the team to spread out and prepare for the assault. With a nod to Tlack, Jim initiated the attack. The team moved with precision, taking out guards and advancing towards the command center. Explosions erupted, and chaos spread as the Zarl scrambled to respond to the unexpected intrusion. Jim and Tlack pushed forward, leading the charge. They reached the command tent, where the Zarl leaders were frantically trying to regain control. Tlack used his disruptor to incapacitate their systems, causing confusion and disarray. Inside the tent, a fierce battle ensued. Jim fought with a relentless determination, every move calculated to neutralize the threat. Tlack, using his advanced weaponry, provided crucial support. Together, they overwhelmed the Zarl leaders, striking a critical blow to the enemy's command structure. With the leaders incapacitated, the Zarl forces began to falter. Jim signaled for the team to fall back, their mission accomplished. They retreated under the cover of darkness, leaving behind a scene of disarray and demoralization. Back at the base, the news of the successful raid spread quickly. Morale soared as the defenders prepared for the final confrontation. Jim and Tlack regrouped with Captain Mitchell and Briggs, planning their next move. We've weakened them, but they're not defeated yet, Jim said, his voice firm. We need to press the advantage and launch a full-scale attack. Captain Mitchell agreed. We have to strike now while they're disorganized. Every moment counts. The dawn of the final day arrived, and the defenders of Alice Springs moved out in force. The Zarl, reeling from the disruption, were met with a coordinated assault. The battle was fierce, the ground shaking with the intensity of the conflict. Jim led the charge, his presence a rallying point for the defenders. He fought with unwavering resolve, pushing the Zarl back step by step. Tlack, by his side, used his technology to devastating effect, their partnership a testament to the strength of their alliance. As the sun climbed higher, the tide of battle turned decisively in favor of the defenders. The Zarl, their command structure in ruins and their forces in disarray, began to retreat. The defenders pursued them relentlessly, ensuring they could not regroup. By midday, the battle was won. The Zarl forces were in full retreat, their invasion thwarted. Cheers erupted from the defenders as they celebrated their hard-fought victory. The threat had been repelled, and Earth had been defended. Jim stood with Tlack, looking out over the battlefield. The cost had been high, but they had prevailed. Captain Mitchell approached, a rare smile on her face. We did it, Carver. We pushed them back. Jim nodded, exhaustion and relief mingling in his expression. This isn't just a victory for us. It's a message. Earth won't be conquered so easily. Clack placed a hand on Jim's shoulder. Your world has proven its strength. My people will share this victory. Together, we can ensure a future free from the Zarl threat. As the celebrations continued, Jim allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had faced an unimaginable threat and emerged victorious. The alliance between humans and aliens had been crucial, and the bonds formed in battle would shape the future. The war was not over, but for now they had secured their home. Jim looked to the horizon, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together, they could overcome anything.